Canary by Cloud9 3/4. Chapter 13. Trustworthy. Sure, Midori felt ready-ish for the sports festival. His rising fame, though, not so much. He heard people muttering about him on the train. Not him, of course. Canary, having no idea that he was standing right behind them. On his way to school, he often found himself walking alone up to the crossroads where Shinso would wait for him, or he would wait for Shinso. It was an unspoken and unsigned agreement they had made early on to their friendship. It was rare that he'd bump into Ida, because he always arrived too early for Shinso, and thus too early for Midoriya. That meant the only person he had the slightest chance in meeting at the train station was Uraraka. What he didn't expect was for it to be waiting for his train to arrive, standing nervously on the platform as he stepped out. "Hey, Midoriya!" she called out, hurrying over to him with a big smile stretching across her face. He frowned and waved feebly in response as he began to walk out of the station with her. "So, how are you today?" she asked, weaving expertly around the people in the crowd. Struggling to follow suit, Midoriya only gave her a thumbs up when they were free from the crowd of the morning commuters. Good, she replied. They walked in silence for a while longer, which was nothing unusual. It was only when they were a good distance from the train station, when the road they were taking along was all but empty, that Uraraka finally spoke what seemed to be on her mind at the while. I listened to the radio last night, and I know it's you," she exclaimed. Her eyes clenched shut, and her fists balled as she announced this. Midoriya wasn't sure what to say. He clenched the strap of his backpack, biting the bottom of his lip as he looked down at his shoes. You have an incredible voice." He slowly met her gaze. You really think so?" he whispered. Uraraka smiled in a sympathetic kind of way. She walked back over to him, linked her arm and through his and began to march up the hill. "I'm your friend, Midori, and I'd never lie to you. Now, come on, I'm dying to know. How does this happen?" Well, he stuttered, still more than bewildered about her response. I found my quirk." "Oh, yeah," she exclaimed, taking her arm away from his so she could clap her hands in realization. "Oh my goodness, you're not quirkless!" Midoriya rubbed the back of his neck nervously. No. "And it has to do with singing? What?" she squealed, bouncing up and down. "That sounds so cool." Well, it's a little tricky to get my head around," he stammered. "Everyone's quirks has difficulties," Uraraka insisted. "I mean, I have to sleep with mittens so I don't float everything. Ida has to drink gallons of orange juice to get his engines working properly. There's a guy in my class called Canary. He has an electric quirk which short circuits his brain if he uses too much voltage at once. And then there's... Wait!" Midoriya blinked at her. "What? You're going to compete in a sports festival, aren't you?" I suppose." "In which case, don't tell me anything," she exclaimed, "just in case we end up facing each other." Oh, Midoriya hadn't thought about that. What if he has to battle Shinso? "Okay, then. Who else knows that you're Canary?" Uraraka whispered to him as more UA students crowded the road on their way to school. From school?" She nodded. Just you and Shinso. And you know Jiro?" "Jiro? She knows too?" She overheard me and Shinso talking. I guess that makes sense. Oh, speaking of which..." They'd reached the crossroad now, where Shinso stood waiting this time. He wasn't alone. "Hey, Jiro!" Uraraka called as she rushed over to her friend. "Floaty heard my voice on the radio," Midoriya explained to Shinso. "So she knows?" he confirmed. Midoriya nodded. "Well, that makes 4 of us," Shinso sighed. Uraraka gasped. "What about Ida?" "What about him?" Jiro frowned. crossing her arms. He's heard Midoriya speak too. If he hears him on the radio, then he'll connect the dots, Shinso explained in a hushed voice. That would make 5 of then, Jiro realized. You're not great at keeping secrets, are you, Midoriya? Midoriya would beg to differ. He didn't often open his mouth enough to let secrets out. Don't worry, I'll just tell Ida before he accidentally lets the cat out of the bag, Uraraka offered. If that's okay with you, of course. Midoriya just nodded again. There wasn't really any other way around it. Operation Canary Protection Squad is a go, proclaimed Uraraka, in a much quieter voice than usual, whilst punching the air excitably. Canary Protection Squad? Seriously, though, said Jiro as they started walking again. You're not even in the hero course yet, but you're further down the line than any of us are. What? No, I'm not. You all have fought real villains. Jiro blinked at him in surprise. Perhaps she hadn't expected him to speak. Midoriya certainly hadn't. People know who you are, Jiro acknowledged. The sports festival this year will be packed for sure, but not just because of the first year's class who survived the villain attack. They'll be looking for you. Midoriya bit his lip. She was right, of course, but that didn't make it any less unnerving. Yeah, you're getting super popular, Uraraka added. Mina was the one who showed Canary to our class, and she said she heard it about from one of her dance lessons, and who knows where they heard it from. Then there was that situation yesterday, Euro continued. With your keycard, it just makes everyone all the more curious. Don't freak about it, Midoriya. Shinso interjected. Midoriya must have looked freaked for him to feel to need to intervene. He smiled at Shinso, thankful that he could at least see this. Besides, if you meet in the tournament round of the sports festival, you'll lose anyway, he smirked. Uraraka frowned, opening her mouth to protest when Midoriya just nudged him playfully instead, grinning widely. We'd both have to fight Corkless, Midoriya replied in a lesser than a whisper. But you'd be surprised how useful dance class can be. Wait, dance? Uraraka exclaimed. Midoriya yelped in surprise, which caught a few odd stares as they walked into UA. Uraraka grasped him by the shoulders and gingerly shook him back and forth. Why must you hide these awesome skills from us? She cried. See? He's not bad at keeping secrets at all. He just hides the unnecessary ones and spills the most important ones, Shinso realized. Midoriya gave him a look. What? It's true. Speaking of secrets, Jiro said, did you leave the thing at home this time? She must be talking about the key card, Midoriya realized. So he smiled and nodded as they reached the door to Class 1C. The girls' class was a little down to the hall. Good, Jiro nodded in satisfaction. We should go. Ida will have it out for us if we're late, Uraraka realized, and with a wave of goodbye, both hero students were gone. Shinso sighed. Well, that was a chore. What? Midoriya frowned as they walked into the classroom. They're nice. Too nice. It makes you think that they have an ulterior motive. Don't make me paranoid too. I'm not paranoid, Shinso frowned as he sat down. Their classmates narrowed their eyes at the two of them. It must have been strange, only understanding odd snippets of their conversation. Shinso barely seemed to notice as he continued speaking. What I'm saying is they're making you feel unnecessarily uncomfortable. They're just pointing out the obvious, Midoriya pounded. And yeah, it does make me scared for the sports festival, but I already was, so he trailed. Off, unsure of what to say. Hands hovering vaguely in midair. What is this about? Questioned Oshi in a strangely exasperated tone of voice. None of your business, Shinso shot back, without a second thought. Midoriya simply smiled apologetically at her. One day, she continued, I'll know enough sign language for your conversation to not be so secret. That'll be a shame, Shinso retorted. Midoriya wasn't quite sure what to do to de-escalate the situation, so he just waved his arms about in hopes that they would get the message that he wasn't encouraging this. Speaking of secrets, her said Koneko, her tail twitching in excitement as she leant on Oshi's desk. You guys hear about the incident with Canary's keycard yesterday afternoon? Their eyes drifted back to Shinso, who just glared at them. Midoriya could do nothing but watch helplessly. I heard he dropped it somewhere, and a girl from Class 1B found it. Then Shinso tried to convince her to take it to Principal Nezu before it disappeared into thin air, recited Kana before pushing her glasses up her nose. Well, I heard he was on the radio last night, so he must have gotten the key card back somehow, snapped Shinso. Oh, exclaimed Koneko. I wonder who he is. The whole mystery is super intriguing. Well, he's not in our class, reckoned Matsumoto, who had his feet up on the desk behind Shinso. None of us have a singing quirk, right? Well, the only quirk we don't know a thing about yet is Shinso's, realized Koneko. Leaning further over Oshi's table, much to her distaste to get closer to him. You really want to know about my quirk? Shinso snapped. Oh, do tell us about... Koneko stopped talking immediately, her eyes glassing over, a vacant expression spreading across her face. Go back to your seat and stop bothering me, Shinso ordered. And the cat-like girl did exactly that. Everyone stared at him. What the hell did you... started Tashibana, but President Mike slammed the door open before he could finish. Well, hello, my little listeners, he cried. How are we today? He made absolutely no sign of acknowledging the anxious atmosphere. Let's take the register, shall we? Everyone nervously made their way back to their seats, eyeing Shinso suspiciously. As they went, when President Mike finally reached Koneko's name, Shinso decided to be dramatic and clicked his finger as he broke his hold on her. She blinked, glancing around bewilderment. I said, Can we get a yeah from Koneko? President Mike repeated, pointing at her theatrically. Yeah? She frowned, looking back over at Shinso and Oshi, wondering how she got all the way back over here to her desk without realizing it. The room was awfully tense as their teacher continued the roll call. Give us a wave, Midoriya! He waved gloomily. And a good morning from Shinso Itoshi? Morning, he grumbled. And let's finish it off with a yeah from Maki Matsumoto. Yeah. Excellent. All present and correct. He grinned widely. Now, just a little heads up for y'all. The sports festival is just around the corner. Barely a week's remaining. You might find some of the hero students around the school training. So try not to get in their way. But you're all more than welcome to train too. The sports festival is a chance to show your stuff and an opportunity to be transferred to the hero course, even if you didn't pass the entrance exam or take it at all. Midoriya couldn't wait for all of this to be over, to finally be in the hero course with Shinso, and not to have this silly secret identity, of course. The hero course thing was wishful thinking, but he couldn't help but dream. He wondered if Shinso daydreamed about that too. He must have felt awfully uncomfortable with everyone staring at him and exchanging whispers and pointed looks all morning. That was why Midoriya wasn't all caught off guard when Shinso grabbed the hold of his wrist and pulled him forcefully from the classroom as soon as lunch break began, leaving their bayaks behind. They didn't talk, sign, or otherwise as they waited in line for food. Only a brief conversation occurred when Shinso asked what Midoriya would be having so he could order for him. When Shinso sat down, he immediately began to wolf down his food as if he wanted to get out there as quickly as possible. Midoriya tapped his chopsticks on the side of his bowl. That ringing noise reached Shinso's ears, so he sighed and looked up to read Midoriya's hands. They'd be less hostile towards you if you tried to explain, Midoriya tried. Shinso put down his chopsticks. They wouldn't. They'd never do. You is different. You showed me that. Shinso stared at him for a moment, struggling to think of a reply. We talked about this before. They see me as a villain, and that's that. Well, what could you possibly do with your quirk to make you a villain? Midoriya questioned. Of course, he knew the answer, but he was trying to prove a point. Shinso blinked at him dumbfoundedly. Seriously? Just give me an example. He sighed. I don't know, brainwashing someone into robbing a bank. That's often what people jump to for some reason. Well, what about my quirk? Midoriya felt a bit weird addressing a quirk as his own. What about it? I can think of plenty of villainous things I could do with it. Oh yeah? He smirked. Like what? The right song could kill everyone in this room. Shinso's smile faded. I hadn't thought of that. Does that make me a villain? No, of course not. Because you'd never do something like that. Exactly, Midoriya retorted, pausing to eat the first mouthful of his lunch. Exactly what? Shinso repeated. Midoriya put down his chopsticks again. As in, I could use my quirk to become a villain, like you could. But I won't, like you won't. A ghost of a smile appeared on his friend's face. I guess, but the others don't see it that way. Then show them, Midoriya told him with a look of determination. Show them you're not a villain. I'm not the only one the sports festival gives an advantage to. Now Shinso was really smiling. I look forward to it. Nodding in satisfaction, Midoriya finally turned to his slightly cooler lunch. Shinso, who was a lot further ahead of Midoriya when it came to eating, ended up waiting for him to finish. That was when a group of people that Midoriya recognized to be from Class 1D sat down beside them, cursed the lunch hall and its lack of table space. They didn't bother the two of them on the whole. It was just awfully difficult not to eavesdrop on their conversation when Midoriya and Shinso couldn't have won themselves, especially when the topic was swerved around something that made Shinso suppress a wicked grin, and Midoriya wished he could sign and eat at the same time so he could have finished little earlier. Oh my god, speaking of the sports festival, did anyone listen to Canary's hour last night? Midoriya and Shinso briefly exchanged glances. The real question is who didn't. No, the real question is, how the hell is this related to the sports festival? Because Canary's competing in it, duh. He's singing though. Shinso flicked a piece of his remaining rice at Midoriya, who just glared at him in response. Shinso's grin was getting harder for him to hide. I wonder what class he's in. Who is definitely not in ours. We already had that conversation, remember? Hey, you guys are from Class 1C, right? Shinso turned to him in reply. Yeah. Well, do you think Canary's in one of your lot? He could be a second year, was Shinso's answer, trying and failing to dodge the question. He's probably not though, pointed out the girl who had brought the topic up in the first place. Why would you try and transfer to the hero course as a second year? You probably wouldn't let them. Well, if he is one of ours, he hasn't said anything, Shinso said, now expertly avoiding the truth. What do you think about it all? And now they've turned to Midoriya. Midoriya's mute. Midoriya Saver, alternately known as Shinso, snapped. Oh, sorry. And that was the end of that conversation. Shinso actually started laughing as they walked back to the classroom. Your face was all he managed. Oh, shut up. Midoriya signed aggressively as possible, but Shinso's smile was weirdly infectious. You're lucky the sports festival is not that far away, or else there is no way you'd keep your secret for long enough. Shinso laughed as he signed. Midoriya just crossed his arms as he plunged himself down into his seat. Amongst his various open notebooks, fortunately nothing Canary related. Shinso just laughed again. You think pouting's going to help? Midoriya narrowed his eyes. You look like an angry little bird. Midoriya offended. Offended, Midoriya reached behind him to try to playfully punch Shinso's shoulder, which again caught more than a few stares from their other classmates, but they didn't really care anymore.
At least
I
they had each
hereby
other.
initiate the very first meeting of the entire Midoriya Protection Squad, Uraraka exclaimed as Midoriya and Shinso reached the small group of hero students, consisting of Ida, Uraraka, and Jiro. You have no idea how hard it was to tell Ida your secret without accidentally telling everyone else in the process, Jiro sighed. In my defense, your method was rather baffling. Midoriya Ida protested, doing his little karate chops in the air as they began to walk. We only tried to get you in a quiet place where nobody would overhear, Uraraka retorted. It's not my fault. I can hear whenever someone's coming our way, added Jiro. Well, I don't think our day was quite as eventful, admitted Shinso. Although Midoriya silently disagreed, he lowered his voice a little more. Although it's funny when people talk about Canary with the real Canary. Raraka laughed loudly. Oh my gosh, that made me so weird! And the four of them continued to make fun of Midoriya the entire way to the train station. Apparently, he really did look like an angry little bird. Shinso didn't translate when Midoriya signed that angry little birds go for the eyes. Although all the talk about Canary did eventually force Midoriya to put his headphones in on the way home in order to block it out. The UA uniform did catch some looks, and Midoriya didn't want to have to go through the struggle of explaining his muteness again. He prepared some notes on his phone ever since the incident with Mina, but he'd still rather avoid the situation. However, the problem with music and Midoriya was that ever since he discovered his quirk, once he started listening, he found it incredibly hard to stop. He just loved to listen to songs and theorize what abilities they could possibly produce. And that was what led him to go for a wander after his train arrived. He felt awkward just pacing around his house listening to music. It was far easier to delay his journey home instead. Midoriya was really getting into the swing of his musical tangent when he was abruptly stopped by an unfamiliar woman crashing right into him, knocking off his headphones. I'm so sorry, she cried, scrambling to her feet and picking up the little drawstring bag she dropped in the process. Sorry, are you okay? Midoriya nodded and got up by himself. Yeah, good, she confirmed, and he just nodded again. Good. Greenie, come back! She charged off again. Miller blinked at her. Well, that was odd, he thought, turning off his headphones and hanging them around his neck. The woman was now standing underneath a tree by the side of the road, her hands cupped to hold the open drawstring bag as she called for whoever Greenie was up the tree. Midoriya's curiosity got the better of him and he jumped over to her side. She smiled meekly at him. My birds escaped, she admitted. It's not the first time either. I run that pet shop over there. She tilted her head in the direction of the little shop, its door swinging open in the wind, showing a little trail of birdseeds that led from the shop to the woman's feet. That was when Midoriya realized it had become the little bag. It come from the little bag, and she'd been using it in hopes of tempting the bird back to her. Don't worry, she'll come back. She always does. She just likes to be difficult. Midoriya hesitated before pulling his phone out of his pocket and tapping on the notes app. Can I help? He wrote. Catch Greenie? She frowned, before sighing and looking up at the tree. The bird had started singing loudly, obvious rather proud of its escape. At a second thought, he showed her one of his previous prepared notes. Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya, and I am selectively mute. Sorry if this causes an inconvenience. The woman smiled. Hi, Midoriya, and no, don't worry, but can you whistle? Midoriya cocked his head to one side to show his confusion. It's Greenie. She's the oddest canary I've ever had, but she responds well to whistling. Only I can't whistle. I'll have to wait until my partner gets back. Midoriya looked back up at the tree. He couldn't see the bird, and he hadn't really tried whistling for a long time, but it wasn't talking. He waited for a moment as he listened to the distant bird song, then repeated it to the best he could. The woman stared at him, stunned. Granted, it was quite an impressive thing to whistle. Midoriya had to repeat the tune a few times before the tiny shape of the bird appeared on the lowermost branches of the tree. Here, insisted the pet shop owner, thrusting the bag of birdseeds in Midoriya's hands. Whistling the tune one last time, Midoriya held out the seeds in the same way the woman had, and Greenie finally flew down to the perch on top of the bag. The owner sighed in relief. Oh, thank you so much. That would have been a nightmare otherwise. Come with me. Don't worry. She's got birdseeds now. She's not going anywhere. And so Midoriya followed the woman back across the street to the pet shop, with the birds sitting smugly amongst all the food. She slammed the door shut as soon as Midoriya stepped inside, but it didn't frighten the bird one bit. She just sat there, noticeably used to the scenario, but content with her bribe for returning. Thank you so much for your help, said the woman. Greenie has a little cage of her own over there. She pointed to a little green cage near the window. It's left hanging open. There was a rather heavy padlock on it. Midoriya frowned. There were quite a few different animals in the little store, but all the other birds were separated into only two cages. Why was Greenie all alone? Want to know the story behind that one? The woman smiled, expertly reading Midoriya's bewilderment. He nodded eagerly. Well, I remember how she's the oddest. Remember how I said she's the oddest canary I've ever had? Well, I wasn't exaggerating. You see, female canaries can't sing. Greenie chirped at her in response. She sighed, rubbing her temples in all the stress of it all. So I thought she was a boy. So I put her with the boys, and well, she's definitely not a boy. Midoriya glanced at the birds. Most of them were bright yellow, except the occasional one, which were a little more of a lime green color, not quite like Greenie's feathers, but close enough for the assumption to be made. Then I put her in the cage with their girls, and God, she's so loud and won't shut up. Frightens the others half to death and pecks all their plumage out. So the only logical solution was to separate her until someone was brave enough to buy her. But of course, no one does, so they either want a girl canary because they don't sing, or boy canary because they do, and sometimes people want more than one so they're not lonely. I always say that canaries don't mind not having companions, but they never listen, and you can't put Greenie in with another boy, obviously, and she just attacks the girls, she complained. Midoriya looked down at Greenie. She looked like the happiest bird on earth. Her entire body was concealed by the seed bag, which was definitely was fuller to being with, and only her head sticking out, staring at Midoriya complacently. But the little bastard doesn't like the cage. Keeps somehow unlocking it by herself, hence the padlock. Would you believe it? He played dead so I would open the cage to check on her, and she just flew off. Well, I won't be falling for that trick again. You hear me, Greenie? She hurried over to the lone cage to open it, and Midoriya hesitantly placed her inside. She didn't move from the bag. Midoriya stepped back as the shop owner struggled to get Greenie out of this sack of birdseed. He glanced around the shop for a while before his eyes lingered on the sign next to the other birds. Canaries, male or female, price varies, 3,000 yen. Wait a second. Canaries? A smile stretched across Midoriya's face as he pulled his phone from his pocket once more. Mum, Izuku. Hi, Mom. So, I were asking me what I wanted to do with the money for the radio station? He was pleased to see the answer was almost immediately. Mum, did you find some merchandise you liked? Because you can have whatever you want. It's your money. You don't need my permission. Izuku, well, it's not exactly merchandise. Mum, you can get anything you want, sweetie. Izuku, what's the rules with pets in our apartment? Mum, you want a pet? Izuku, it won't be much trouble, I promise. And I'll buy anything she needs and look after her and stuff. Mum, I don't know, Izuku. We can't have dogs or cats or anything large. Izuku, even canaries? The moment of silence between them whilst he dotted the lines indicating that she was typing appeared and disappeared, all the while the shop owner shouted mercilessly at Greenie, who had escaped the cage again, and was now doing laps around the shop, screaming at the top of her tiny lungs. Mum, there are no rules against birds. Zuko, does that mean I can get her? Mum, as long as you promise to look after her by yourself, cleaning out her litter tray and feeding her and remembering to buy toys and food. Zuko, yes, thank you so much. Mum, see you in a bit with your new friend then. Greenie landed on Midoriya's head, nestling herself happily amongst his curls. The shop owner panted heavily, resting her hands on her knees. She seems to really like you, she managed. Midoriya grinned widely and held up his phone to her. How much is he? How much? She stuttered, her eyes darting between the message, Midoriya, and the bird on top of his head. You want to buy her? He laughed and nodded. She faltered, unsure of what to say, before holding her hand up like she was telling him to wait and dashing over to the phone behind the counter. Yeah, hi. No, nothing's wrong. No? Well, yes. Yeah, but it's okay. No, I'm not kidding. No, I can't. I still can't whistle. It's not that weird. Yes, someone helped. No, yes. No, it's fine. Yes, but if I said someone wanted to buy her, how much would she be? That's why I'm asking your opinion. Yeah, the same guy who helped. No, I wasn't being hypothetical. No. Yes, I know I'm the owner, but still. That was my thought. Okay, fine. You know what? You're being useless. Yes. Don't worry, I've got it sorted now. Yeah, no thanks to you. Okay. Okay, bye. She put the phone down and sighed exasperatingly. What does the minimum say on the Canary sign again? She questioned Midoriya before remembering that he couldn't speak, and hurried over to check herself. 3,000. No, 2,500 yen. No, 2,500 yen. That's the price for you. So after a quick call to his mom and the payment made and the necessary food, equipment, and toys collected, Midoriya was sitting before the desk about to sign the very small amount of paperwork required. Compared to what Azora put him through, it was nothing. You can change your name if you want, the shopkeeper pointed out, tapping the empty box where the name of the bird was supposed to be written. You know, since your name means green anyway, I only use Greenie because apparently I couldn't call her Satan. Midoriya laughed at the bird who still hadn't left his hair, tweeted in at her in protest. I'm kidding, she grinned. Anyways, do you have a name in mind? Midoriya frowned. He really hadn't thought of that. He let his mind wander. There really had been lots of talk about Canary, but Midoriya felt much safer amongst all that when it was just online. As his popularity grew so dramatically over the relatively short time he'd been on the radio, as did the theories and the questions, the speculations. One of the things that Midoriya found the most interesting were the suggestions for what his quirk might be. There had been all kinds of possibilities. One of the most popular was a play on lullabies, where his singing lulled people to sleep, which wasn't impossible, or another fan favorite, an imaginary work dubbed a siren song. Now, Midoriya knew all about the mythical being of sirens, and he had followed the same, at the time, useless tangent of research that had led him to the stories about canaries in the mine shafts. Sirens were mermaids whose singing hypnosed sailors into swimming out to the origin of the beautiful sound, only for them to be dragged to the most deepest depth of the ocean, never to be seen again. The quirk, Siren Song, was supposed to be with had supposed to do with hypnotism, something which Midoriya had eagerly sent to Shinso, although he'd yet to find a song that could give him such power. He was sure there were plenty of out there. For now, Midoriya was all focusing on improving his abilities in certain songs, so they were as powerful as possible for the upcoming sports festival. Expanding his arsenal of songs was just a hobby at this point. Midoriya smiled as he picked up the pen and filled in the bird's new name. Siren? The shopkeeper read out loud. Close enough to Satan for me. Anyway, there we go. She's all yours. Or you are all hers. Either way. After it had been all finalized, the kind shopkeeper, whose name he never did catch, helped him to load Siren's various supplies onto her new cage. Not the tattered old green one, with the massive padlock attached, and grinned from ear to ear. Midoriya skipped out of the pet shop with the bird happily perched on top of his head. Once he had returned to his path home, as the sun began to set, Midoriya looked up at the top of his head as best as he could in hopes he could see Siren's little face. So, you won't be needing dinner today, then, I guess. The bird flew off his head and landed on his shoulder. She gave him a determined chirp. Oh, yes, I can talk, he said. He was talking to a bird. Oh well, there was no one around him to hear him. I just find it difficult talking to humans. She chirped again, digging her tiny talons, which was definitely the appropriate word, into his blazer to ensure her grip. My name's Suzuka Midoriya, he continued, and your name is Siren now. I hope you like it. There was a moment of silence before another satisfied tweet. I saw you didn't like your cage at the pet shop. But don't worry, I won't lock this one for you if you don't want, as long as you promise to keep your mess inside there and nowhere else. Chirp. She obviously didn't understand him, but it was worth a shot. It's funny, the shopkeeper said you weren't supposed to be able to sing. But me? Well, I have to sing. It's my quirk. Like a superpower, but I'm not very used to it, and I still get scared in front of people. Tweet tweet. There's a big sports festival coming up soon at my school. If I do well, I might be able to move to a better class and I can train to become a hero. That's what I that way I can help as many people as possible or anyone who needs help, you included. He continued. It was kind of nice letting his thoughts spill out of his head for once. If I become a hero, my name will be Canary. That's what people call me at the radio. I go there to help my confidence in speaking to people. Maybe one day you could come too. That would be funny. He walked up to the stairs to his flat, whilst making sure the little bird didn't fall off. Now, my home is up here. I live with my mom. She's really nice. You'll like her, but you have to be nice to her back, or else we'll be having some trouble letting you stay. Oh, and keep your voice down overnight. You don't want to wake up the other people. Why was he talking to a bird again? He unlocked the door and pushed it open. Mom, I'm back. I'm in the kitchen, she called. He closed the door behind him, kicked off his shoes, and hurried over to meet her. Mum, this is Siren. Siren, this is my mum. She smiled sweetly at him. Perhaps she thought it was silly talking to the bird, but at least she was talking to someone. Oh yeah, she's very sweet. Did she stay on your shoulder all the way back here? She frowned. She was serving up dinner for the two of them. Just how long had Midoriya's detour been? Midoriya nodded. I don't think she's found fond of cages, but she never goes far. She knows where the food is. Chirp. Inko jumped at the noise. She put her hand over her heart as she spoke. Well, she's your responsibility. Tweet. And perhaps you're hers too, she laughed. Well, go put her things in your room, and we'll have dinner. Quick, before all goes cold. And Midoriya hurried over to his room, cleared a space by his computer, and rested Simon's bird cage there. He hastily sets up the little perches for her, and food and water, but as expected, Simon wasn't particularly hungry. She did, however, funnily enough, keep her mess inside her bird cage, hopping off Midoriya's shoulder just to do that. He blinked at her. The shopkeeper was right. She sure was a weird canary. Then again, so was he. I hoped you all had a good time listening. Yeah, I I I'm going to see if I can upload two this evening or yeah. I hope you all had a good listening and see you next time. Bye bye.